is our employee resource group sponsor. We have Forvia, Adient, Foley and Lardner, Martin Rea, Invisix, Henkel, and Amstead Automotive as well. So we're very appreciative of them and all of the support that they show us, not only today, but throughout the year as well. A little more housekeeping to do before we jump into the main event, just to highlight some of our upcoming events for 2024. We have something really exciting coming up February 3rd at 7 p.m. and it's virtual, so it should be really, really easy for everyone to register and attend. It's this great film that is highlighting breaking barriers, driving change within the Automotive Women's Alliance Foundation. This is featuring some of our key members. So if you're interested in learning more about what we do here or just want to see some of your friends on screen, this would be a great event on February 3rd. We have an event on February 7th. This is another virtual event called How to Build Financial Security. And then March 14th, we're getting together in person at Monroe & Associates to learn from Susan O'Cray, who's the COO of Monroe & Associates, all about lean design methodology. So that should be a really fun one. I'm excited to go there in Auburn Hills and check out their facilities. If you're interested in learning more, go to awafoundation.org. You can learn all about the organization and about the different events that we have coming up. We're always adding to this list. So if you're not able to make these dates, definitely check that out and stay abreast of what we're offering in the future. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we'll get to the main event. So today we're here for the latest iteration of our M2Z series. This series is focused on showcasing up-and-coming leaders in the mobility industry so that women new to this space can have someone that's a little bit closer to their path to help guide them into how these emerging leaders got to where they are and what lessons they learned along the way. Although some of us women that have been in the space for a while are excited to learn from you as well, Yvonne. So we're really happy to have you. Just along the way of more of a personal introduction, I met Yvonne back in 2018. She was still a college student back then, but I was so impressed with her capabilities. And Yvonne, I'm not even sure if you know about this, but there was kind of this like joke that we would make about you.
Oh, can someone go on mute? There's a telephone number that's...
No, I went to go give them to him.
Okay, there we go. I think we got it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. So it was like me and some of the other old timers, we were all joking about how it would just be a few years before we were all reporting to you. So I'm not sure if you were aware of that, but it was one of our favorite jokes, just because you kind of like came out of the gate, even though you were still in college and, you know, starting off in your career, and you demonstrated such poise and such a phenomenal decision-making and leadership capabilities that we were like, oh, wow, what are we doing here? Look at her and what she's accomplishing, you know, just so early on in her career. So it was an honor to work with you. I really, really enjoyed the time, and I'm excited to be introducing you here today. So just to go over your official bio, Yvonne is currently a Senior Supplier Quality Engineer at Our Next Energy, also known as ONE. Yvonne's academic foundation is a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Michigan Tech University. She continued her education via graduate studies, earning both a Master of Engineering Management and an MBA from Lawrence Tech University. Yvonne's professional journey started at Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, also known as Stellantis, in the Purchasing and Supplier Quality Leadership Development Program. Here she gained knowledge throughout various areas of the company before moving to her primary role as Supplier Quality Engineer. Her background includes assembly plant operations, manufacturing, and quality with an expertise in high-risk supplier development. Yvonne took on leadership roles, including culture chair and VP events in the Society of Women Engineers at Stellantis. She is also an involved alumni of Michigan Tech, annually returns to her alma mater to recruit and coordinate activities, bridging students and industry. So with that, I'm going to hand the floor to Yvonne, and so excited to hear what lessons you have to share with us today.
Awesome. Well, I am excited to be here as well, and I really appreciate that wonderful introduction, Hannah. It also has been great to reconnect and see how even people that enter your early industry career come back and end up flourishing with some of these opportunities. So it's always great to see old faces back. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I have a quick couple slides just to show here. Let's get this. Okay. You guys can see that okay?
Yep, that looks good.
Take it as a yes. Okay. So first things first, I am a Michigan Tech grad. I love the UP and I love traveling to cold places in the winter. It's kind of an odd thing. People usually go to warm, Bahamas and tropical retreats, but as you see, all of our pictures are all cold. Me and my husband like traveling a lot, and we've been trying to hit every NHL arena. So we've been checking them off the list. We're at 16 so far, and another quite a few to go, we'll say. So with that, there's a couple personal pictures, and beyond that, I do not have any children, but I have a cat and a dog, as shown on the screen. I've been married for 3 years now, so that's exciting. In my free time, I do Polish folk dancing, so that's a huge part of my culture and just growing up. So I've done it since I've been 2.5. There's a picture in costume down in the right-hand corner. And now I'm fortunate to be an assistant teacher for the children's group. So I've been doing that for a couple years now, and I also still dance as an adult. So that's a huge part of my life outside of industry. So I'm going to walk through my journey and just some of the highlights through some of the career moves that I've made and some of the opportunities I've been given that ultimately at that point you don't know will make a turning point in your career, but they end up being vital parts of my early career. So first things first, I started out at Stellantis, which at that point was FCA. I was in the leadership development program for purchasing and supplier quality. So with that, you had the opportunity to rotate throughout areas of the company over 2.5 years, varying lengths of rotations. It's not quite set. But with that, I was able to, I'll call it, do my primary role for the first year. So I really got to dig in deep to the supplier quality engineering, figure out how to do the job, how it's done, how to be efficient in corporate realistically. At that point, you're out of college, you're going into a very large OEM, trying to learn the ropes and understand your place in your role. So with that, I worked on forward and rear lighting, and that's actually where I met Hannah. But with that, I was able to really just understand how professionalism worked, right? And how to make a name and how to come in and really be confident in your role as an engineer coming out of college. From there, we moved, typically after your first role, you'd move into a plant role, which sometimes is scary for people moving into assembly plant, especially so early on in your career, but that was one of the best moves that I made. So I worked at the Sterling Heights assembly plant as a supplier quality engineer stationed at the plant. With that, it was current production, so it was really understanding how the vehicle was manufactured, what the day-to-day looked like in the plant and assembly areas. After that, I switched gears 180 and was a buyer for a short period of time. So with that, I was able to learn negotiation, how the business operates from both a supply chain and capacity standpoint, but also from the financial side and understanding cost and how that impacts early decisions within engineering and the product development lifecycle. So with that, the first pivotal moment came. I was coming out of a buying role. It was in the middle of COVID. I received a phone call from a manager that typically took on rotational students, and he had an opportunity for me. He said, I have an opportunity, but it's in the plant and it's during launch and it's the middle of COVID. So it was construction gear, COVID gear in the plant every day, coming from, working hybrid, I would say the last 6 to 8 months. So that was one of those moments where I knew if I didn't take the challenge, I was going to be doing the same, same types of roles, and I was willing to take on that challenge. And that was quite the pivotal moment in my career. So learning how to operate during launch in a plant, in a new, brand new facility, brand new product, flagship vehicle is Grand Cherokee L for Stellantis. So it was high visibility, very fast paced. And I think a lot of the skills I learned from that really shaped my next couple of roles. If I didn't have that exposure and that urgency with that role, I think I would have been less successful in my future roles. It was quite pivotal. So moving on from that, I did that for it was like 4 or 5 months in the plant for launch. And then after that, they had me manage the reliability fleet for the same vehicle. So I was able to work with the contract testing provider. I was actually stationed there for a while, and really understood the very early on user testing of a vehicle. So that was also very neat. Got to drive the vehicles before everyone else. Got to explore all of the root cause and all of the analysis from a software side, which I have no software background. So that was quite the learning experiences, how to understand modules and software development. But then after that, I moved into my, I'll call it full-time real role after the development program was complete. With that, that's where I gained confidence. So I already did this job once coming into Chrysler in the beginning. So I was a supplier quality engineer, did all the rotations, and then moved back to being a supplier quality engineer. So at that point, I already had 3 years under my belt. I kind of knew what it was like in the plant. I knew what it was like launching a vehicle, but I was able to apply everything from those first couple years in my primary role. With that, I was tasked with a supplier that had very complex assemblies, and they supplied almost every single assembly plant that the OEM had. So it was very, it was one of those suppliers that if something happened to it, or if like the power went out or some kind of high risk situation, it could impact down the line for our assembly plants pretty severely. So very high visibility role there, and that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working with that supplier. I was stationed out there for a while as well, and really being in the manufacturing plant every day, understanding the capacity and launch of a complex assembly. Then from there, I moved into glass and weather strips for a short amount of time. Glass and weather strips was something I never had any experience in, so it was very different from a technology front. Working in glass is very different than any other commodity. That took a lot of learning curve from a technical standpoint. So I would still not consider myself an expert by any means in glass. For the short amount of time that I was there, there's still so much to learn. Moving on, I am in my current role right now. I'm still in supplier quality, but I now work for Our Next Energy, which is a startup based in Novi, Michigan. So with being at a startup versus an OEM, a lot of the tasks are different, even though I'm doing essentially the same role. So since it's a startup, there's a lot of processes and development that's necessary in order to execute your job. Whereas at a established company, a lot of that process is already developed and you're following it as your job. So I'm kind of creating, as I'm doing my job, the processes are creating and really morphing to what the company needs. So that gives a unique opportunity to be a piece of that and to be part of shaping the future of the company. So that was a very unique opportunity. And I will tell you, it was not planned by moving companies at that point. And it was another spontaneous decision that was ultimately a great choice. And I have been loving it so far. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So obviously, Hannah went over some of my education. I do like going back to Michigan Tech, like I said, the UP. I have a soft spot in my heart for Houghton and that area. I tend to go back multiple times a year. But I do want to highlight some of the other organizations that I've been a part of that have helped some of my network and mentoring and really gaining confidence in this space. While I was in my, I'll call it normal role, my supplier quality role at Stellantis post the rotational program, I really started doing a lot with Society of Women Engineers. I was the VP of events. So we were running 2 to 3 events minimum a month for all of the members. And there's 400 plus members in the SWE group at Stellantis. So with that, I was able to do something that I enjoyed in mentoring and helping high school students and really pushing the STEM topics while still doing my normal engineering role. And that's something unique and valuable that I think was a great experience. And honestly, some of my best friends are from that organization when we started it. And another thing is I do literacy coach for the Center of Success Network in Pontiac. So it's all virtual, another shameless plug opportunity there. It's really cool. You get to mentor and coach on literacy to students from all over Detroit and Pontiac. So that has been a nice thing outside of work that just, it fills your bucket, right? It makes me happy and I enjoy it. Is there any questions so far or anything that I can answer before I keep talking? You can also put them in the chat.
No questions,
I'll
just
be...
very impressive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, we'll keep going then. Okay, so after all of that, I've gained quite a bit of experience in, like I said, high visibility, high risk situations. And I think some of my main points to take away from so far in my career is that every new challenge is an opportunity for growth. So every time I'm like scared or nervous or doubtful to go into a new challenge, I know that overcoming that challenge will ultimately mean that I'm growing. And being comfortable means that you're not growing. So in my position at an OEM, like I said, it's very established. As much as I loved doing the job and stuff, I was getting comfortable. And getting comfortable is a scary thing. So moving on to a startup really pushed my opportunity to grow and is really pushing my bounds to what I can do and what I can accomplish. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. And I would highly suggest that if you have the chance to take a challenge that might be slightly outside of your comfort zone, something spontaneous that you weren't expecting, maybe it wasn't part of the plan, right? I have this great plan that hasn't worked, hasn't been to a T. We've had a lot of deviations in the plan as it goes. And each of those deviations and bumps in the road have really created quite the opportunity for growth. So take on the challenge, even though it's very nerve-wracking for sure. Keep learning. This is one that I know people always say it, but it's so critical. So when you start getting, like I said, comfortable or, thinking you know everything there is to know about a process, that's when the blind spots come in, right? So you end up getting some blind spots and really could miss some major things within your role or within your development. So understanding that there's always more to learn, no matter how much you know and how long you're in industry or how long you've done the same job, there's always more to learn. Within my career, by title, I've done pretty much the same job within quality and supplier quality, but each experience has still given me different opportunities to learn, even though, again, by title, it's the same. This is my favorite one, and I left this for last because I think joining these sessions and really networking and using your voice is huge. So advocating for yourself is something that I've been to several talks on, and I think it's so important because if you're not going to do it, no one else will. You have mentors and network that's going to back you, but ultimately you are the one that needs to advocate for yourself. It's very hard. It's hard to be, boastful and you feel like you're not being humble, but at the same time, you know all of your expertise, you know your worth, and you will be able to fight for that. And with anything, that's even personal development, career development, even outside, right? So you know what you are capable of, and you can advocate for yourself that way. So that is my favorite point, and I always keep that as last, and understanding that you are worth everything that you have done in your experience, and push forward from there. So with that, I hope there's some questions or at least some discussions that we can chat about.
Yeah, I have some questions, Yvonne. Just waiting toward the end. So I have a couple that I have a lot actually, but
Okay.
I had a few that I wanted to touch on, and then maybe we'll open it up to people from the audience to ask their questions as well.
Okay.
So, when we first met, you were participating in the leadership development program at Stellantis. And I remember this was quite a large time commitment, if I recall correctly, like something along the lines of a couple of years.
Yep.
And they rotated you through different roles that were maybe things that you hadn't necessarily considered at the start of your career, but then they gave you exposure to things that you may not have considered.
Yep.
Can you talk about this experience and having gone through it and now having the hindsight, is this something that you would recommend for other young people to participate in and start their careers off in this way?
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of I have a lot of talking points on rotational programs. So in an OEM setting, so I know all OEMs have some version of a rotational program. Not all of them are created equal, but all of them are equally as beneficial, if that makes sense. So each one is very different, and even depending on which company you go with, rotation length will be different, different types of jobs, whether you stay, I'll say, within one discipline or you move through different disciplines, varies from company to company. But any opportunity that you have to take a rotational program gives you guaranteed movement. So I think that's one thing I really liked about the program is I knew even if it was between, usually the rotations were between 6 and 12 months for me. So even if it was 6 months, I knew that I had a different opportunity chance within the next 6 to 12 months to keep moving through the program. With doing it quickly, you're forced to learn a lot quickly because you only have 6 to 12 months to make, make an impact in that area that you're in. So you learn things very quick. You start ground running, but at the same time, you learn so much in such a short amount of time that I think that's part of my growth, right? Is that I did so much in such a little period of time. It was only 2.5 years that I did that. So yeah,
It's really interesting. I find it interesting as well that you kind of went back. It seems like you hit a sweet spot for yourself with the supplier quality, and despite rotating into different positions, you seem to have come back to that role, which I think is a fun one, and you did great at it. So
yeah, the
I'm
one
happy
thing
to
in
see that.
supplier quality is every day is different. No 2 days will be the same, and then depending which suppliers you get assigned to, your scope could be completely different, right? So depending if it's electronics, if it's body and white, if it's even something like medical devices. So I have friends that do, supplier quality for medical, or even raw materials. You can do that for any area and still have different experiences.
Yeah, I've worked in quality for years as well, and I thought it was interesting because you get your hands into everything. You aren't necessarily the one that's designing it up front, but you're the one that's fixing the problems. You have to learn about the mechanics, the electronics, the software, the manufacturing. So it's a big challenge, but I'm sure you're doing phenomenally at it, and I'm happy to see that you've stuck with that.
Yep.
A little bit more on the personal side. So I remember seeing like all the beautiful pictures of you in your dance costumes, the Polish dancing, and that was always exciting. I know that's one of your passions, and sports as well, and you're continuing to support your alma mater. How do you balance work life and maintaining your interests outside of work with such not only a challenging job, but you were spending so much time on your education as well? So, do you have any tips for how to balance all of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it varies from person to person. So for me personally, I'll start with school because I was in school I graduated in 2023, May, with my final master's degree. So I was in school for the first 5 years of my professional career. Balancing the workload so supplier quality is also not a job that ends necessarily at 5 o'clock, right? So you're constantly working with suppliers and manufacturing and assembly and all of those details. I think having the understanding with your leadership and management really helps because I had class, once a week, 6 to 9:30, whatever the class was. I had to be there, right? I couldn't be doing work stuff at that time. I made it very clear that, this was my class day. This is, when it is this week. And all of my management really respected that. I know that's not maybe always the case, but I was very upfront with my schedule, and what my commitment would be to school versus, I'll call it nighttime calls. So that was one thing while I was in school. I also did some online classes. So I did a mix. I did both in person and online. In my heavy time during work, like when I was doing launch or doing plant work, I did online classes. So I didn't go in person. If I was doing my normal role, then I went in person. With that, I am a calendar tracker, so I constantly have everything in my calendar. And I make it public for everyone at work. So if you know, like everyone knows what I'm doing at all times. And I think that also helps. So if I did have like a team meeting or something for school, I would put, 6 o'clock team meeting on my calendar. That way, when I get that meeting invite, it's already there that I'm occupied. With travel, and now that school's done and working with some of the things that I really enjoy, so working with Polish dancing and doing stuff with the kids and all of those types of extracurriculars, I'll call them. I balance it in the ways that I know some of my non-negotiables. So like if I have a performance or something that if I have to be at a performance at 5:30, I make that very clear. But at the same time, if I need to leave practice 15 minutes early because I have a global call I need to attend, I try to make that balance and understanding which one is the important priority at that time. So definitely some prioritization going on of which ones I'm going to and how I'm balancing it. But I think knowing where those bottom lines are, right? So like I said, a performance, I have to be there at a certain time. I have to perform and keep going. So that's been helpful.
I think that ties into one of your key points as well about advocating for yourself. So I like your comment about setting those firm boundaries and having flexibility, but also having those dates and those times that cannot be infringed upon, and maintaining your priorities in your personal life as well. So that's great advice. I have a couple more questions. I'm just going to do one of them, and I'll give people the opportunity to chime in as well. It's very impressive that you did all of this while also going to school, and you touched on that a moment ago. Now that you have finished these 2 graduate degrees, and you're still really fairly early on in your career, do you have any thoughts, anything you would have done differently in terms of maybe spacing them out or waiting until you had a couple more years of work experience in, or do you think that that was the right way to go, and would recommend other women to do that as well and continue their education immediately?
Yeah, so I think there's, again, varying things depending which degree you're going into. So I did engineering management directly right out of college, back to back, starting work. That degree was based out of it was a quality based engineering management degree. So all of my technical electives and such were based around manufacturing and quality, which is where I worked in. So I think having the bridge between what I was doing at work and what I was doing in the graduate classes really helped. I think if I was doing a degree that might be outside of my area, I don't know if it would have been as easy to manage both at the same time. So if I was doing more, maybe an electrical engineering master's, but working in manufacturing, I'm not sure it would have crossed over as nicely. I think doing the technical and ones that relate to your job right away worked well. And then doing my MBA second also, I think, was beneficial. I think by the time I started my MBA, I was already three years in or so. So I had enough professional experience to use those examples and do the case studies and strategy within the MBA. Whereas I think if I would have started the MBA right away, I wouldn't have had any experience to go off of. So technical, I think you can do right out of college. You're already coming out of a technical degree most of the time. But MBA was nice to have a little bit under my belt.
Nice. I don't know what you're leaving for yourself to do next, because it seems like you're knocking everything out right from the get-go.
No PhD.
You're done. That's where you draw the line.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to open it up. I'm sure the other women on this call have lots of questions. So I think pretty much everyone is muted, but feel free to unmute yourself, and you can pick Yvonne's brain and ask her all of your burning questions now. You must have covered everything perfectly.
I don't know.
Or maybe people just need a minute to unmute.
I thought your questions were very good too. They had a lot of good points.
Well, it's just from knowing you from years ago, and I was always very curious about how that rotation thing worked out for you once you were done with it, and what your thoughts were on that. So it's been great to after a couple of years, pick your brain and see where you are and what you're doing. So, okay, no one else has a question. I'm going to ask another one because you made a pretty massive move recently. So going from Stellantis, which is like this behemoth company that's well established and everybody knows, and I'm sure there are processes and procedures for everything there, to a startup, to Our Next Energy, that has to be a massive culture shock, a huge change for you. So I'm curious to hear about that change, what you think of the startup world, and also what led you to making that leap?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I kind of alluded to it. It was very spontaneous. So it was not, I had my full plan, and my plan was to say it was Stellantis. I had moves, I had everything ready to go. And this was just a different fork in the road, right? So the opportunity came up. They were building their operations side of, side of the business. So typically startups start pretty heavy in R&D and other areas, and operations comes later on once your product's in production and you're starting to move into manufacturing. So they're building their operations side of the team, and obviously supplier quality was an opening, with the opportunity to create process and to create how we operate as an organization and a department was a huge opportunity for me. So I saw that as like, that was my challenge, right? So I said, seek the challenge. That was the challenge. I want to make the most efficient, automated process that I can from scratch. So instead of, walking in and just, here's your job, here's how you do it, here's your procedure. I mean, I'm not saying there's not much, right? So I know how to do the supplier quality job, but now I can develop the way that we're going to do it as a company, and how we're going to develop metrics, and how we're going to, track all of our quality standards, how we're going to get approvals for things, So I'm doing things in an organizational front, which I never would be able to do at an OEM. So I'm making changes that impact the full organization, not just quality, or not just one part or commodity. So it's been a very big change. I'm in person every day, so startup culture in that sense. So in person in Novi every day, which going from, I've been work from home hybrid for 3 or so years on and off, with obviously going to suppliers and plants and in and out. So that's not really different for me. It's just different going back to kind of how it was, because I was in office previously. Like, that's normal to me. So going back to normal. And I think one thing about moving to Our Next Energy specifically is the mission. So I did my undergraduate minor in alternative energy, and I did a lot of my undergraduate studies in alternative energy. And moving to an OEM, I wasn't really using that at all. I mean, I was doing automotive, right? So now moving into the battery space, automotive, commercial, energy storage is another component. I can actually utilize some of the things that I was interested in studying in undergrad. So it's definitely a personal mission for sustainability as well.
So I have a question regarding that.
Yeah.
Hi. So how do you feel? I know that you're not in Stellantis anymore, but and you already mentioned as well that in an OEM, it's a big company. They already have their processes settled. But if you think back, how much do you think that you would have been able to introduce or implement some sustainable options into their already established operations?
So I'm going to talk from like a quality perspective, because I mean, obviously OEMs are huge. So departmentally, the whole department at Stellantis that I was in is the size of the company I'm in now, which is also a crazy thing to say out loud. So from a departmental standpoint, if I wanted to make a process change or adjustment to any of our procedures or any of the ways that, we do business, I'll call it, in quality, it would be a multiple month process. You'd have to kind of like beta test it. You'd have to have a pilot group. You'd have to have a global pilot group. There's multiple steps you have to take to implement any kind of new effort, whether it's sustainability, whether it's environmental, whether it's just a procedure change on how you do something day to day. Whereas in the company I'm in now, with like being in a startup environment, a lot of those things I can bring it right to the VP level. I can bring it right to the C-suite level, get approval pretty quickly on how we're going to do it and execute it. So for instance, within my first 6 weeks, I think, at the company, I implemented 2 new automation procedures, and they started July 1st, like immediately. So it was very quick and easy to get things done after you get approval. Whereas at an OEM, it's still going to take multiple iterations and groups to trial whatever that process is.
But you don't see it, let's say, impossible. It's
No, it's
possible,
not
but
impossible. Yeah, definitely
you
not
have
impossible.
taken time. Okay.
Yeah, so so I worked on a project at Stellantis that probably took, I think, total all in all, from like brainstorm concept to execution of a dashboard, was probably a year and a half, compared to, like I said, like 6 weeks. So I mean, it can be done. It just takes a lot more effort, and you're constantly working on it in the background on top of your normal role. And I don't want to say you get burned out of it after a while, but right, you're working on this project, you're trying to get it implemented, and you're a year in, you're on your 3rd beta group trial, and then, finally it gets approved after, 16 months.
Okay, 13. Thank you.
Yeah, you definitely can. It just takes that much more effort and determination to get it in.
Okay. And well, if you don't mind, how overall during this journey, how have you felt about being a female in this industry? Have you faced any, any
That's a good
difficulty?
question. So with that, I think early on I struggled with it a lot more because you don't really have your confidence. You're fresh out of you're what, 22 years old, fresh out of college, going into an assembly plant with people who have been there for 20 plus years, experts in their field, and you're telling them, maybe maybe your part's not the quality we want. So I think earning the confidence through experience has helped. So those first couple years, I mean, as Hannah said, I worked with her very early on. I might have appeared pretty confident, but there's always that second guessing, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I speaking correctly to, suppliers or even management or people at the assembly plant? You're always second guessing, whereas I feel like after a couple years, I wasn't really feeling so much from being a woman in industry, because you're just confident in your ability to do your job. I think also with depending who you're working with. So I've had a little bit more maybe pushback from some suppliers and whatnot, just because, again, you're the customer coming in and you might be significantly younger, you might be a woman in their whole department might be all men. But I've never had that hold me back from anything in my role. But that's a really good question. I think coming right out of college, it's tough. It's definitely tough.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about AWA as well, because Yvonne, you were talking about advocating for yourself. And this is something I still struggle with, even after being in this industry for so long, because I think that the ways that we as women are able to advocate for ourselves are different than the ways that men can. Yep. And we're just surrounded by men. So these are the role models that we have to emulate. But the techniques that they use, if we try to use them in our own advocacy, they oftentimes can come off as being insincere and disingenuous. They don't really match our personalities. So it's hard to find other women to learn these techniques from, to model ourselves after. And this is another one of the great things for AWA. When you're starting out and you may not have that confidence, or you're facing these challenges of telling men who are much older than you what they're doing wrong. Yeah. To have this group of women that you can come back to and fall back on, and we say, hey, I was there, I've been there, don't sweat it, it'll get better, you're doing the right thing. That it's really, really invaluable to have this group of talented women who are all at different stages in their careers to tap into and learn from.
Yeah, one, I guess, follow-up comment on that is I feel like early on I made connections with some, I'll call them influential women that, maybe were 3-4 levels above me, that kind of took me in, I found a connection with them and I said, this person, I really, really like how they, present themselves in meetings or even present themselves around the office, right? And they just have this like power to them, I'll call it, right? They just have this like abyss of confidence, right? That even though even though I might not work with them directly, I kind of made that connection. And some of those people have been my best mentors. So I might have never worked with them on a like working level, but I saw them in one management meeting and I was like, okay, I'm going to try connecting with them and see how that works. And it's always been really successful. And I think Hannah knows, so I had a very strong woman mentor coming in. So Isa was a really good mentor right out of the gates. So I had someone that was also a woman, and at that point she's just ahead of me in my career, which is perfect because she just went through this. Like Hannah said, she literally did this within the past 5 years, right? So she could guide me in how I developed and how I could, get through those early stages and really grow. But having those strong female mentors have really helped, and all of that's through things like AWA and SWE and other organizations that connect you with these people.
Yeah, that's great. And I love Isa. You and Isa both were just so amazing to work with.
What a good
And
mentor.
even as I was working for the supplier, so there were times when you have to represent your company's point of view, and you would have to as well. And perhaps our positions were at odds a bit. But just to see how you and Isa handled it, even if it was like not the answer that I wanted to hear, I was still like, oh, that was really good. So you have your own personal opinion that you may not show, and then the professional opinion as well. But I was always impressed with both you and Isa and what you guys did.
Super helpful. We have a question.
If you see the one in the chat, says, do you
Okay,
have
yes.
any advice on how to be a successful student working towards their undergrad?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I lost the rest of it.
Undergraduate degree in this field. So it sounds like you're
Perfect.
working, but still doing your undergrad, but obviously in industry and whatnot. And that's pretty common. So I'm actually happy to see that this is a common thing now. I feel like when I was in undergrad, it was starting to become more common that people were doing co-ops or full-time working and doing an undergraduate degree. My advice with this is still, this is going to sound, try enjoy your undergraduate time when you can. You're going to keep working and you're just creating all of these connections earlier. So obviously do a good job in your role and whatnot, but make those boundaries for the things that you need to do while you're doing your, if you have an exam to study for, that's priority, right? To get your degree, get it complete, because you can work and grow beyond that after your degree's done, right? Also, success tip just for early on, make sure you record all of your like small wins and successes. I wish I did that during my internships more because I know I learned a lot. I just don't have that record of things I did during internships. Like I just never, I would present the end of rotation or end of internship presentation, and then that was it. And I lost all of that information. So I would definitely record that and keep that in your back pocket. So while you're working any kind of, projects you work on that maybe are outside of your role or things you do extra, or even just successes within your own job, make sure you record that to keep in your back pocket for when you keep growing and eventually obviously graduate and go into full-time.
Yeah, I think that's great for when you're having a bad day as well. You can, try to keep it in perspective and remind yourself of the big accomplishments that you've had and where you've come from and how much you've learned. It's got to be kind of going from Stellantis to our next energy and describing making these changes in short term. It's got to be so rewarding just to realize how much you've learned and how you can now apply what you've learned and be very, very effective in this new role.
Yeah, it's definitely, I did a better job, I would say, of recording those kinds of things through my early career, when I was actually, I would say, working full-time and stuff. But early on, I just didn't have those small wins to record. And looking back, I'm like, I know I did all of this stuff. It's just hard to quantify it and put it into words. But even making the leap now, I've only been at this company 8 months, and it feels like I've put a pretty good stamp on it, and it's very exciting. So
Yeah, that sounds exciting. It's a great company too. So I'm excited to see what they do with you, with your support and what comes next. So you've already done so much though in terms of your education and your career as well. Do you have any big goals that you're aiming for like in the next 5 years? Like what are your aspirations if you're able to share anything?
yeah, so I think the main aspiration for me, so I value like obviously mentoring, and how I said I've had some really good mentors, and I do think this is, I guess, one difference as well. From being with an OEM, I had a very strong mentor-mentee network, whereas I had people on, like mentees and mentors on both sides. Whereas going to a smaller company, everyone knows everyone, so you kind of have those informal mentorships versus a formal mentorship. And that's something I definitely want to bring into this new company, is like developing the people side and really understanding what we can do to, one, support women, and two, support early career grads. Because I think both of those spaces are necessary to have that mentorship and really have that guidance. So just from, I'd say, a personal project perspective, obviously it's still industry related, but that's something I want to do going forward. And then I really value leading people, and I have not technically been able to lead people yet. So I'm looking forward to opportunities in the upcoming future to, I'm gonna say, officially lead people, be a people leader.
Yeah, I'm sure that won't be too far in your future.
Yeah. So that's an exciting thing that's hopefully on the horizon, and I'm excited to see where that grows, and how I can keep growing as a leader and mentor, and really incorporating some of those programs into the new company.
Yeah, that it's really exciting to see. I think it's quite rare to see someone with the technical background, with the engineering background, to also be so engaged with people and to be giving back and investing not only in themselves and their careers, but in how do you turn around and give a hand up to the people that are following behind you. So that's another, AWA mission that we have. And you're already doing it by participating in the M2Z program and sharing everything that you've learned. So I think you're on a good start for that goal as well. So I think we're coming to an end. We have maybe a couple of minutes left. Does anyone else have any questions for Yvonne? I think we have a very shy audience today.
Listening intently.
Right. That could be another learning too, is right. Part of advocating for yourself is speaking up and asking the questions, especially in this group, because we're all about learning and helping one another here.
Yeah, there you go. You're getting some reactions. That's good
Yeah.
too. I'll take it.
Thanks, Monica. Okay.
Awesome.
Well, I think that's come to the end of my questions, but Yvonne, it's been great seeing you again. We're definitely going to have to get together because it's been, I don't know how many years. We used to do that business trip out to Belleville all the time and hit up the restaurants out there, make the best of the time there. So I'm excited to reconnect and to see you in person. We'll have to choose the time. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your career journey and answering all of the questions. I'm sure it's going to be really, really useful, not only to the women that joined today, but to the women that are able to view the video at a later date. So thank you so much. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you all the ladies who joined and asked questions.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yvonne, and thank you so much for hosting this. This was very beneficial. I know we were quiet today, but I feel like this was super beneficial. I always feel like I get so much from attending these AWA events, and kind of gives me a little bolt of, I need to keep working on my career journey. And you're no different. You definitely inspired me to, put that back at the forefront. So I appreciate all of your time and for you to offer this to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm sure it'll be a great next step in your career, and you will advocate for yourself. So it'll be good.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good, ladies. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your lunch hour. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in person at one of our future events. Don't forget to check out awafoundation.org to sign up for the film premiere for AWA. That should be an exciting one, and check out some of the future events as well. Thank you so much. Thanks again to our sponsors, and wishing you all a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.